all so much for having me this afternoon. My name is Martha Flores. I am a program officer at Stanislaus Community Foundation, but Civic Saturday is something that I do. It's part of my job, but it's also just something that I wanted to do personally. And so I'm really excited to share with you today on what it's all about. Civic Saturday is a program that was started by Eric Liu and Janae Kane of Citizen University in 2016. They are based in Seattle, and they started this program, or they started Civic Saturdays in response to Trump's first election in 2016 as a way to bring community together, friends and strangers, to make sense of the events and feelings of that time. And Citizen University as a whole focuses on training individuals to be civic catalysts. So for myself, I went through their fellowship program on Civic Saturdays, which trains individuals throughout the country on how to host these gatherings in their own local communities. So I did the fellowship training in October, and I did my first Civic Saturday gathering in December. And the central notion of these gatherings is, what does it mean to live like a citizen? There are so many things happening in today's world, so many controversies, so many issues, that it provides a space for people to come together and talk and be inspired to act with each other. So how does it do this? Civic Saturday pulls on rituals. So those emotional connections that you establish with people through repeated actions, and really through conversation and reflection. And they are a civic analog to a faith gathering. And I really love this idea of being a civic analog to a faith gathering. And the reason why, and this is all taught to us as fellows, is that democracy is really like a civic religion. It only works if we believe it works. And before we as citizens can really start to affect policy, we need to be inspired. We need to be equipped with the spirit, with the norms, and the values of what it means to be a powerful, responsible citizenship in our society. And there's this central belief that we are all better off when we're all better off. And the goal of Civic Saturday, and really of being a civic catalyst, is to help close that gap between our ideals as citizens and our institutions. So, you know, repeatedly throughout Civic Saturday, or even this presentation, we hear power, we hear character, we hear these words that are repeated often. And I just wanted to shine the spotlight on them a little bit. You know, power is something that's neutral. It's neither good or bad. And character, these are our moral qualities. When we put power and character together, it creates our citizenship. So how we act in society, how we use our power defines our civic character. And as citizens, we have to remember that there's a ripple effect, that our society becomes how we behave. So, you know, really often we think as individuals like, oh, you know, this is just my own individual action. It's not going to have an effect on anybody, but it really does. It really creates a ripple effect. And I always remember when I was in middle school, I used to play violin, and I was in class one day, and there was one of my classmates, I was just like picking away on his violin strings, and our teacher made an example out of him. And she made everybody pick on their violin strings, and all you heard was noise, just, you know, just chaotic noise, and you couldn't make sense out of it. And that example has always stuck out in my head, is often when we think that what we're doing is not affecting other people, it really does. And our behavior is contagious. Another part of this power plus character equals citizenship is that democracy is like a garden, and we have to tend to it. It's not a machine that just runs on its own. There are phases of adaptation and patience and death and renewal. And it's all part of a cycle that we have to maintain as citizenship, as citizens. And it's active. We have to be active in it. So I think I'm going to get to some of the elements of Civic Saturday on the next slide. But the centerpiece of a gathering, much as it is in a faith gathering, is the civic sermon. And the civic sermon is really, it's the centerpiece. It helps us make sense of the moment, and it pulls from the rituals that are being incorporated into the Civic Saturday gathering, as well from the civic scripture. And civic scripture refers in this sense to readings from American civic text. So, they could be classic, or they can be more informal and modern. In my last Civic Saturday gathering, I used a reading that was a social media post by Dan Rather. But given who Dan Rather is and what he was speaking to, I felt like we could definitely incorporate it into the gathering. And this is what a sample Civic Saturday looks like. There's a welcome and an introduction. There's a piece of poetry at the beginning. There's a turn and talk session, which I'll be incorporating into the next gathering, where it's just, in person, you would literally turn and talk to whoever's next to you. In the virtual world, you're sent into a little breakout room and you get to meet new people. Then there's song. Again, in person, you would be singing together, much like you do in a faith gathering. And then there's the civic scripture readings. Usually there's about 1 or 2 of them. Then there's the delivery of a civic sermon, followed by another song, followed by civic circles, which are breakout room discussions in which participants are given a prompt and they get to discuss that prompt with whoever's in their group. And then we end with more poetry. And this, this is the structure, and we try to stick to this structure, this repetitive structure, to start to create that ritual and that tradition. And it gives people a sense of what they're going to be walking into for the next gathering, and slowly start to build the bonds of not just the host and the participants, but within the participants themselves. So I went through that really quick because I was trying to stick to my little time limit. But that's a little bit about Civic Saturdays. It's really what I think should be an informal, fun hour and a half where you come together with friends and strangers. There's usually a topic for the day. For February, I totally took advantage of the topic of love. And we talked about civic love. And, the hope is by the end of the gathering, much like when you leave a faith gathering, you feel renewed, you feel inspired, and there's a call to action at the end. So my plan right now has been to do one quarterly. I've just done 2. I did one in December and one in February. I'm thinking the next one might be in May-ish. And my ultimate goal for Civic Saturday is to have it be completely youth-led, where youth are picking the readings, they're picking the poetry or writing the poetry, they're writing the sermon and delivering the sermon. And their voice just really gets heard. I think something that's really been appreciated and stands out in the gatherings that I've been doing is that I've had youth participate, and hearing these classic texts being read by a young voice is so refreshing and just really puts a new spin and perspective on what we're hearing, how we're hearing it now, coming from younger voices. So that's a little bit about Civic Saturday, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting and inspiring. I have a 2-part question. One is, can you say what time of the day these have been in the local community? And part 2, I'm intrigued by the concept of Civic Saturday as compared to Civic Weekend, since Jews and Seventh-day Adventists already have their faith gathering on Saturdays. Their way to, accommodate that?
So I've been doing these at 10 a.m. on Saturdays. No particular reason. I just sort of picked a time in December and I ran with it because I needed to schedule it. And Civic Saturday, it's really, this is something that Citizen University created, and there is flexibility on the day of the week when it's done. And I think this is a really interesting point. I feel like I've been seeing a couple or more and more fellows asking about it being on a Saturday as opposed to another day in the week. This is just the structure that I learned, but I myself have been thinking about alternate days in the week that might work. I think, weekends, I think from my perspective, weekends just allow people to not be in that work frame of mind, and to sort of just shift out of that for a day or two.
First of all, I really love the vision, and I appreciate your answer. And I'm wondering if Saturday afternoons or Sunday afternoons, alternating, might allow for a wider range of participants. And ditto to what I just saw in the chat about empowering young people to lead these and get involved.